Test 1, 2. Sound check. This is an audio test. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It looks like we have more space here than the other part. Good morning.
Your hair is lovely.
Yeah, haircuts.
And it's odd because like the Richter is like, well,
Good morning. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my pleasure to declare open the annual session 2026 of the UN Women Executive Board. Please allow me to acknowledge and welcome among us Madame Sima Bahaus, Under Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women. Thank you. I also welcome to the podium the following colleagues. Kisi Madi, Deputy Executive Director for Resource Management, Sustainability and Partnerships. Nyarandizai Gumbozivanda. Deputy Secretary, Deputy
we are asked to do more with less. So once more, I ask you to take back to capitals a call to resource this crucial extensively on UN80 this afternoon. But I will reiterate now our full support for the Secretary General's UN80 reform efforts as the As you know, we were tasked by the Secretary General in partnership with UNFPA to explore the merits of a merger between our two entities. The assessment concluded that there is merit in a on non-structural alternatives to a merger to be shared with you this coming Friday. Both entities are focused on seizing every opportunity to advance the rights and empowerment of all women and girls. Excellencies, before I conclude, I am pleased to share with you two pieces of UN Women management news. While recruitment was ongoing, I know Cambo will be looking forward to engaging with all of you. Second, I'm sure that you have seen our valued Executive Board Secretary, Jean-Luc deserved retirement on hold for us. Excellencies, there is no doubt a daunting moment of disruption and I thank you for standing so resolutely and girls, and I thank you.
I thank for this reason, before opening the floor for your statements, I wish to gently, or rather, firmly for efficiency and optimal use of time. And the time limits will be automatically enforced. Delegations are invited to the first speaker on the list. Albania, you have the floor, Madam Pierre.
Work of the entire team of UN Women in the implementation of this strategic plan. As we acknowledge the progress made in many countries and regions, we also share the concern expressed regarding the growing challenges facing gender equality and increasing women's role in countries' political and public life. Efforts to advance women's economic empowerment support entrepreneurship and increase opportunities for women and girls in education, employment, supports initiatives aimed at enhancing efficiency, coherence, accountability, and impact across the UN system. In this context, regarding the potential merger among entities working on gender equality, we trust that the reform operational effectiveness and dedicated support for women's rights must remain at the center of any reform. We have also entered into the implementation of the new strategic plan. We encourage UN Women to continue focusing on measures that are impactful, innovative partnerships and sustainable financing, while ensuring that the needs and voices of women and girls, particularly those facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, remain at the forefront of all our interventions. In closing, Albania reaffirms its strong support for the mandate of UN Women. As member of the Bureau, we remain committed to working constructively with the Executive Director, Member States and all stakeholders to strengthen our collective efforts and ensure that no woman is left behind.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Albania for her statement. I'll now give the floor to Belgium. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The annual report of Executive Director Bahous gives a clear and encouraging picture. Across countries and regions, UN Women is making a difference. By fully exercising its unique triple mandate, UN Women continues to advance the rights of women and girls in all their diversity at every level. These results matter, but they also remind us of something simple. Progress does not move forward on its own. It depends on steady political backing and on funding that is adequate and predictable. Excellencies, we are meeting at a moment that feels both promising and fragile. In many parts of the world, we have seen real progress in recent years. More girls in schools, stronger legal frameworks, more women at decision-making tables. But at the same time, the pushback against gender equality, against rights, and sometimes against the multilateral system itself is continuing unabated. And when systems come under pressure, gender equality is often one of the first areas affected. We have seen this before. When budgets are reduced, gender expertise disappears from teams. Gender programs are scaled back. Dedicated funding lines are quietly eliminated. These are not abstract risks, they are concrete patterns. This is why we must continue to highlight that gender equality cannot be treated as optional. It is not something to be addressed if resources allow. It is central to development, to peace and resilience. In this context, the coordination mandate of UN Women is more important than ever. We count on UN Women to continue to push for strong gender integration across the UN system and to speak up when it risks being sidelined and to ensure that commitments made by member states are reflected in practice, even in difficult budgetary environments. Excellencies, we need to be honest with ourselves. We cannot expect to deliver more with far fewer resources. But when choices have to be made, they must be strategic. We need to focus on what has the greatest impact, avoid duplication, and ensure that the system works as efficiently as possible. For its part, Belgium has chosen to maintain its support to key partners, including in the areas of gender equality and SRHR, not only because these are core rights, but because they are also essential investments in stable and resilient societies. On UN 80, Belgium supports efforts to make the UN system more effective and more coherent. At the same time, reform should strengthen the UN, not weaken it. It should help the UN deliver better on its mandate, not dilute it. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Belgium for that statement.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished colleagues, my delegation would like to thank Executive Director Missima Bahous for presenting the annual report and commend UN Women for its steadfast efforts under the Strategic Plan 2022-2025, including support for legal and policy reforms, women's economic empowerment, efforts to prevent and respond to violence against women and girls, and the advancement of women, peace and security agenda. For Kyrgyzstan, gender equality is both a national priority and an essential foundation for sustainable development and social cohesion. We are encouraged by the progress achieved in recent years. Following the 2025 parliamentary elections, women now hold 33% of seats in the parliament of Kyrgyzstan. This is the highest level in our country's history. As recently highlighted by the IPU, Kyrgyzstan is among the countries demonstrating one of the strongest rates of growth in women's parliamentary representation. Kyrgyzstan is also proud to play a leading role in advancing WPS and youth peace and security agendas in Central Asia. We have adopted our 5th National Action Plan on leadership of both women and young people. In this regard, I would like to underline that women, peace and security agenda will be among Kyrgyzstan's priorities during our tenure as a member of the United Nations Security Council for 2027-2028. We look forward to working with all partners to strengthen the implementation of this agenda and to ensure that women's voices are reflected in peace and security decision-making. As discussions under the UN 80 initiative move forward, Kyrgyzstan remains supportive of reforms that enhance the effectiveness, coherence, and impact of the UN system. At the same time, we believe that reform must remain firmly anchored in mandates agreed by member states and ultimately be measured by its ability to deliver tangible benefits for people on the ground. We attach particular importance to transparent, inclusive, and evidence-based consultations with member states playing a central role in shaping decisions on any potential Kyrgyzstan remains committed to working closely with
You have the floor.
Comprehensive and candid presentation of both the results and the as a country that has long championed the cause of gender equality. We are deeply concerned about the weakening of global norms and the disproportionate suffering of combat violence against women, to expand economic opportunities for women, and to increase women's political leadership and participation. As we welcome the Executive Director to say in enhancing peace, resilience and economic prosperity. However, this ambition must be accompanied by sustainable financing. The Dominican Republic therefore supports the call of this board to advocate for predictable, flexible It is also a time of opportunity. The Dominican Republic places full confidence in the vision and institutional capacity of UN Women. Our partnership with the board is critical, and we
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And good morning. I have the honor to deliver this joint statement on behalf of Albania, Australia, Belgium, Canada, and UN Women and its staff for their continued commitment to advancing gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in an increasingly challenging achieved under the Strategic Plan 2022-2025 including progress in strengthening legal and policy frameworks, supporting women's participation in peace building and political processes, particularly in fragile, conflict-affected and humanitarian settings, where their role remains indispensable. Mr. President, we also recognize the important progress on the UN Women's Coordination Mandate, including of system-wide commitments, including the quadrennial comprehensive policy review, and we also welcome continued efforts towards gender parity and improved accountability across the UN system. At the same strengthen oversight, risk management, and organizational effectiveness. These are important for maintaining confidence among member states and partners. However, we are concerned on its mandate. Predictable, flexible, and sustainable co-funding remains essential. In this regard, we encourage continued efforts to broaden the funding base while safeguarding adequate levels of core resources. (2026-2029), we welcome its focus on prioritization, accountability, partnerships, and results. Against the backdrop of growing needs, resistance to gender equality, and constrained resources, we encourage further reflection on how UN Women will sharpen its comparative advantages and ensure that gains achieved We look forward to jointly advancing gender equality and ensuring that no woman and no girl is left behind. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate from Luxembourg for their
I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Benelux, our long-standing union with Belgium, Luxembourg, and my own country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Let me begin by thanking the Executive Director for growing pushback and development financing is under pressure. A strong and effective UN Women is more important than ever. Its unique triple mandate, bringing together normative support, UN and multi-year core funding. Core resources are not simply a funding modality. They are a strategic investment in UN Women's institutional strength and effectiveness. They enable the organization to deliver across the entire mandate, maintain its normative leadership, support We recognize and appreciate UN Women's efforts to maintain donor confidence in a difficult financial environment. As highlighted in the annual report, voluntary contributions reached over 500 The continued stagnation in the ratio of core to non-core resources remains a matter of concern. Excessive earmarking can contribute to fragmentation and limit the ability needed to address evolving priorities and challenges. Additionally, a solid core funding base remains and coordinated UN development system requires member states to match their political support for reform with predictable and flexible financing. Reform cannot be delivered sustainably through increasingly fragmented funding streams alone. A healthy funding mix is essential. The Benelux and the revitalized 2024 funding compact. Finally, we underscore that transparency, accountability, and strong performance remains essential to maintaining donor confidence and fostering increased core funding.
I thank the distinguished delegate of the Netherlands for their statement. I now give the floor to our first speaker. On the national statements.
Given the uncertainties of the ongoing reforms and restructuring, your presence our new strategic strategy program donor-driven. Sometimes it is the money, the fund. I wish to put particular emphasis on areas that can drive and policies, like the one you mentioned, Madam Executive Director, emphasize in particular that reforms should be I invite the board and UN Women to look into some best programming, common office, common back office services, have proven to help enhance coherence, national ownership, and effective delivery as well as efficient operations. We would welcome a visit by UN Women and the board, for that matter, partners, to turn our commitments into very concrete results for all women and girls. I thank you.
Statement. And now give the floor to Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Democratic governance. UN Women's engagement has significant development, particularly in advancing women's economy to safeguard our national development gains. Remains fully gender responsive and continues transparent and evidence-based. Structural change for program countries. Mr. President, or girl is left behind. I thank you, Mr. President.
Followed by Canada, Moldova, Finland, Republic of Korea. Germany, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, to my country. First, the findings in the annual report highlight the significant impact of UN women's efforts and emphasize the importance of continuing this work. We're very encouraged that over the course of the strategic plan cycle, UN Women helped at but lasting progress depends on how well results are sustained over time, so continued attention to long-term impact is necessary to ensure meaningful and enduring change. coordinator system, because a trusted and sustainably financed RC system is central to the success of the reform of the development system, serving as a catalyst for more integrated, effective, and future-ready UN. Millions of women and girls. The established system is more than a negotiated outcome. It is a global promise. To advance gender equality. And in the parts of UN Women to Bonn and Germany. We welcome that further potential reform steps will be shared for discussion at the end of the month as alternatives to a full merger.
Floor to Canada.
Thank you, President, Executive Director, delegates. Microphone for Canada, please. Canada reaffirms its strong support for UN Women and its unique normative mandate, an essential pillar for advancing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development societies.
Commend UN Women for strong results under its strategic plan, reaching over 14 million women and girls. Independent assessments, including MOPAN, highlight its critical impact at scale. Addressing these challenges will require stronger coordination, more coherent country-level delivery, and alignment of ambition with sustainable resources. Canada sees the UN must safeguard the integrity of UN Women's mandate. While Canada appreciates that the assessment has been shared, it does not yet provide sufficient clarity or assurance position to support the proposed merger as currently framed. This position underscores the need for stronger safeguards and clarity alongside Canada's continued support for
from Canada for his remarks. I now give the floor to Moldova.
Executive Director Bahus, President of the Executive Board, Excellency the women's continued commitment to delivering tangible results for women and girls, strengthening national capacities, supporting gender-responsive policy, women are in the current center of the decision-making process. At the national level, the Republic of Moldova achieved a significant progress in several key areas. We have continued to strengthen our legal and institutional framework to advance step to protect women and girls from digital violence, and for the first time criminalized digital violence. The landmark law protects increasing women's participation in the labor market and promoting greater financial inclusion. Efforts have likewise been intensified to prevent and combat all forms of violence against women and girls.
Madam Executive Director, first of all, Finland wishes to express its sincere appreciation for the important work of the UN Women. The annual report you presented tells a powerful story of 3 years when the need is the greatest. We see gender equality often deliberately reframed, not as a universal human right, but sometimes a political tool givers. We reiterate our support to the UN80 initiative objective of a more efficient and coherent UN that produces quality results to people all over the world. It is for their letter to member states on the further elaboration and refinement of a set of complementary alternative options intended to strengthen coherence, operational alignment, years. It is imperative also to have predictable and flexible funding. Investing in gender equality is foundational for peace, resilience, and sustainability.
Representative of Finland for her statement. I now give the floor to the Republic of Korea.
First, the strategic plan. We commend the strong result delivered over the last 4 years circle, including support for 394 laws, advancing the rights of and countries, so that mandated impact reaches women and girls where it matters most. Second, accountability and oversight. And women to maintain the high standards of transparency. As a major contributor and host of the UN Women Knowledge and Partnership Center in Seoul, we will continue to dedicate solely to gender equality. UN Women's triple the mandate must be preserved and strengthened, not diluted. Reform should reinforce the gender equality and that entity has delivered real efficiency from within. This is precisely why we await the forthcoming report on alternative options with keen interest. Delivered on a complete picture. Mr. President, in closing, allow me to reaffirm our unwavering commitment to this entity's mission for women and girls.
Madam Executive Director and the full UN Women team. Sweden recognizes the powerful impact of UN women in advancing gender equality across the globe. Achieving such results we appreciate the continued work with the Gender Equality Acceleration Plan. Through its leadership, UN Women plays a key role in strengthening the UN's capacity to deliver on gender equality. Sweden fully supports the ambition of UN80. Also support the Secretary General's recommendation that entity-specific programming tools align with and available resources, prioritizing delivery and technical expertise. On the possible merger of UN Women and UNFPA, we see clear risks of a dilution of mandates and a weakened ability to perform crucial tasks that rest on both organizations. It is questionable whether a merger will succeed in advancing the key UN 80 objectives of efficiency and effectiveness. As things currently stand, we are not in a position to support a merger of UN Women and UNFPA. We strongly welcome receiving comprehensive information on all alternatives and expect to be consulted if the matter would advance to the General Assembly. Sweden remains one of UN Women's most significant donors. Our contributions are accompanied by the highest of expectations regarding effectiveness, transparency, and achieving tangible results, especially at country level. UN Women can count on Sweden's continued support and engagement. In return, we count on your leadership. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Sweden for his remarks, and now give the floor to Bulgaria.
Mr. President, I extend my gratitude to you and the Bureau for your leadership. You can count on Bulgaria's continued support and constructive engagement. I thank the Executive Director for her presentation. Bulgaria welcomes the results achieved under the Strategic Plan 2022-2025, a time during which my country had the privilege of being a member of the Executive Board. At a time of numerous and intersecting crises, growing pressures on the multilateral system, and persistent challenges to gender equality and women's rights, UN Women's role is more important than ever. Bulgaria remains a strong supporter of the entity's triple mandate and commends its continued effort to advance gender equality through normative support, operational activities, and coordination across the UN system. We welcome the progress achieved in strengthening legal and policy frameworks, expanding women's economic empowerment, supporting the women, peace and security agenda, and increasing assistance to women and girls in humanitarian and crisis settings. We also recognize the important contribution of women-led and civil society organizations as indispensable. Bulgaria further appreciates UN Women's continued effort to enhance transparency, accountability, and institutional effectiveness, as well as its engagement in broader UN reform processes. We thank the UN Women for the shared document regarding the legal elements on the potential merger of UN Women and UNFPA, and would like to reiterate that in case of a merger, it would be of utmost importance to fully preserve the UN's mandate. As the entity implements its strategic plan 2026-2029, we reiterate our support for member states allocating predictable and sustainable funding and look forward to continuing our constructive cooperation with the UN Women and fellow board members to advance the rights, equality, and empowerment of all women and girls. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of
Director of UN Women for her presentation of the annual report. We also appreciate the President and the members of the Executive Board for their efforts in facilitating this session. The Kingdom of Bahrain emphasizes the central role played by UN Women as part of its mandate in supporting member states in translating international commitments related to women into practice. in enhancing governance, transparency, and accountability, and ensuring the effectiveness of UN Women's programs and their consistency with the needs and priorities of countries in a way that contributes to achieving tangible and sustainable results in the field of women's empowerment and equal opportunities. In light of the emphasis in the discussions of the strategic plan on the importance of governance, oversight, and risk management, we stress the importance of continuing to follow up on these issues in order to enhance the efficiency of UN Women's work and the effectiveness with the support and directives of His Royal Highness Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa, the Crown Prince and the Prime Minister. The Kingdom of Bahrain has paid great attention to the advancement of women and has made them a key partner in the national development process through policies and legislation that promote equality, equal opportunities, and non-discrimination. Plays a pivotal role in equal opportunities and gender balance. These efforts are foster a system of economic initiatives and programs to support women entrepreneurs an international award for women's empowerment launched by the Kingdom of Bahrain in partnership with UN Women as an initiative to highlight successful experiences in this field in line with SDGs and the Beijing Declaration Platform
I thank the distinguished delegate of Bahrain for her statement. I see the speakers list.
Morning, Excellencies, Madam Executive Director and your team. Thank you very much for presenting your report. Impressive results. We read it very carefully. We saw the numbers, we saw the data, we saw the strength. It presents a very encouraging picture to amount of money you've given to different societies, to different organizations. We're impressive of that. Thank you very much also for reaching to more than over 2,300 women organizations. That is impressive in our countries. Also encouraged by the data you provided in terms in the coming strategic plan. But the report also presents very stressful things that probably we need to be looking at. And they have been mentioned by several colleagues: the decline in finance, the which benefit more with the work you do on the ground. We would wish to see more in finance. And probably lastly, Madam Executive Director and your team, we read in terms of the 2026-2029 strategic plan. That would be very useful. And also maybe if you can, Madam Executive Director and your team, what are you thinking of given the decline in financial, with the financial constraints. What are your thoughts in terms of the 2026-2029 strategic plan that you I think as UN Women, you should focus on those areas where you think you can scale and achieve more within the remaining time. But by all, thank you very much for the report.
Thanks the Executive Director and her team for the presentation of the annual report and welcomes the achievements of UN Women under the Strategic Plan 2022-2025. We commend UN Women's efforts to advance gender equality and women's empowerment despite a challenging global environment. The Philippines recognizes UN Women's important role within the UN development system public services. As a developing country highly vulnerable to climate change and disasters, the Philippines underscores the importance of ensuring that women and girls remain at the center of development, humanitarian, and climate action efforts. As technology increasingly shapes economies and societies, women and girls must be fully equipped, along with their peers, with the skills and opportunities necessary to participate contributions to economies and societies in both countries of origin and destination, but are still faced with increasing risks and dangers. We encourage UN Women to further strengthen President, Madam Executive Director, to the next strategic plan. We encourage UN Women to strengthen support for country-led approaches and national priorities and contexts. We also emphasize the need for predictable and sustainable funding sustainable development. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines for his statement. I now give the floor to Denmark.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, Excellencies, colleagues, let me start out by thanking Madam Executive Director and all UN Women staff and women continues to deliver strong advocacy for women's and girls' rights as human rights. Denmark is deeply concerned by the development within global norms on gender equality, sexual and reproductive can be considered safe and no hard-won gains can be taken for granted. In this context, UN Women's coordination and normative mandate is more important than ever. We must insist to advance the empowerment, economic participation, PA and UN Women merger, which we find provides a coherent and balanced view of the potential risk and benefits by an organizational merger. On that basis, Denmark continues to see clear value in exploring closer integration between UNFPA and UN Women, not as a cost-saving exercise, but as a means to strengthen coherence, institutional capacity, and more effective and sustained delivery of mandates at uninterrupted. Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, Excellencies. Finally, Denmark reiterates our strong support for the strategic plan I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Denmark for her remarks. I now give the floor to France.
I thank you, Madam Executive Director, for the presentation of your annual report on the activities of UN Women. As regards your performance, the agency has obtained excellent results in achieving the goals set in the ground and to providing quality goods and services to women, including in context crises. Your action in more than 130 countries has made it possible to make considerable progress in the area of gender equality. Madam Executive Director, feminist diplomacy and very soon a new national plan of action on the theme women, peace and security. This is also the reason why France supports the activity of UN Women on the ground, such as in Ukraine, where the agency to play a role in the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We are thus following closely and supporting the ELSI program for a greater collective responsibility. The legitimacy, credibility, and sustainability of our multilateral system is at stake. In this connection, France hails the streamlining efforts undertaken by UN Women. We encourage the agency to build on the momentum to refocus its activities, for pooling resources on the ground, and for greater consideration of the opportunities offered the capacity for action and the mandates entrusted to it can be guaranteed in a context that is worrying in terms of the polarization and an undermining of the progress that has been made between men and women. The speaker's microphone has been cut off.
I thank the distinguished representative of updated the list of speakers. Nepal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, dear colleagues. Nepal associates itself with the cross-regional joint statement delivered by Luxembourg Nepal thanks the Executive Director for the comprehensive presentation on the implementation of UN Women Strategic Plan 2022-2025. We commend UN Women for its steadfast leadership, partnership, and impact at a time when progress on achieving gender equality faces headwinds globally. The report demonstrates that even in a context of multiple crises, UN Women delivered tangible results, supporting legal and safeguarding sustainable development, peace, and resilient societies. Despite these gains, the report also delivers a sobering message. We are clearly off track to achieve SDG 5 by 2030. Women remain underrepresented in leadership, continue to shoulder disproportionate unpaid care responsibilities, face persistent violence, including in digital space, and remain most vulnerable safeguards that make gender-based discrimination punishable by law. We have strengthened women's participation in public life as a result of constitutional guarantees and affirmative measures over aligning national resources with gender equality outcomes. We continue to strengthen protection and access to justice for all women and girls, including through local mechanisms to prevent and respond to gender-based violence and through greater investment in survivor-centered services. Mr. President, as we move into the next strategic plan 2026-2029, Nepal welcomes the strategic plans, strategic pathways to progress, advancing women's leadership and decision-making, women's economic empowerment, ending violence against women and girls, and strengthening CEDAW, WPS, and 2030 agenda to ensure gender equality for all women and girls. Let us remind ourselves, equality cannot and should not remain a promise deferred. It must become powered institution, adequate resources for mandate implementation, safety in communities, and opportunities for a sustainable future of all women and girls. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nepal for his statement. I now give the floor to Japan.
Opening statement and comprehensive annual report. Japan deeply appreciates UN Women's tireless efforts toward the achievement of SDG 5 as reflected in the annual report and anchored in the strategic plan 2022 to 2025. Indicators at the development result output level demonstrate resilient capabilities in the face of global divisions and backlash. Also welcomes the fact that active bilateral dialogue has been maintained through Executive Director's visit to Japan on the occasion of the UN System Chief Executive Board for Coordination this year, following her Minister for Foreign Affairs, Eri Alfier, with Deputy Director, Executive Director Kashimadi in May of this year. Japan strongly recognizes UN Women as an indispensable partner in advancing gender advancing gender equality, women's empowerment, and women and peace and security. Japan remains fully committed, maintaining and further strengthening this close partnership going forward. Regarding the ongoing discussions on the proposed merger of UN Women and UNFPA, it is Japan's utmost priority to ensure that
I thank the distinguished representative of Korea for his statement. Sorry, Japan. My apologies. Japan for statement. I now give the floor to Croatia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We also express our sincere appreciation to the staff of UN Women for their dedication and hard work in a challenging global context. Distinguished colleagues, no country has achieved gender equality. This sentence is written on the second page of the report of the executive. The challenges upon us, but it also confirms the value of a strong, effective, and well-resourced UN Women. At a moment of disruption, we must match political commitments with finance and conflict on women and girls is evident across many contexts. Yet women remain underrepresented in peace processes, as well as reconstruction efforts. And persons and the rebuilding of the social fabric after conflict. Madam President, gender equality should be a system-wide effort. We should like to undermine the important work of the Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund, whose Croatia remains committed to cooperation with UN Women, including through the She Demines project in Ukraine, which brings together mine action, recovery, and women's leadership. Finally, transparency and results-based delivery. Thank you.
I thank the distinct delegate of Croatia for his comments. I now give the floor to South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. The most striking elements of the report is the successful advancing of the triple mandate of the UN Women while making gains on the achievement of the SDGs. South Africa is particularly pleased with the progress made in women's economic empowerment, especially the normative efforts in championing gender-responsive care systems. These results are a validation of the strategic approach of UN Women, as well as its importance towards the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals. We remain concerned about the continued prevalence of gender-based violence and recognize the continuous efforts of UN Women in support of whole-of-society approaches to combat this scourge. Continued support in the development of prevention action plans, survivor-centered services, and partnerships with key stakeholders is deeply appreciated and greatly encouraged. Mr. President, the proliferation of conflicts and impact on civilians has the greatest impact on women and girls. And these groups often remain overlooked in the potential value they offer under the Women, Peace and Security agenda. Despite these and other ongoing challenges, the results reported today are a testament to the inherent value of the multilateral processes and constructive partnerships. The triple mandate of UN Women is serving its objective. This formula is working. In conclusion, we recommit our continuous support for the strategic direction of UN Women. The report on the implementation of the strategic plan confirms sustained progress. Whilst we may not be observing this at the pace which we have targeted, we should not diminish this progress nor change our course. Our commitment to UN Women as a valued partner remains steadfast, and we look forward to the next strategic plan in the final push towards 2030. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of South Africa for his remarks. I now give the floor to the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the Executive Director of UN Women, Sima Bahous, for her presentation of the report. At this challenging time for the United Nations, the Russian Federation supports the organization's efforts to achieve equality between women and men. Our country, which enshrined equality between women and men in the Constitution over 100 years ago, has traditionally attached particular importance to this agenda item and the associated entity. The entity's activities should be focused on implementing its unique trickle mandate and not go beyond the limits of that mandate. UN Women must also act exclusively at the request and with the consent of member states. The unauthorized expansion of its activities, especially in the human rights area, not only dilutes the important work of the entity in improving the status of women, but also undermines trust in it on the part of developing countries for whom socioeconomic issues are particularly acute. Genuine improvement in the status of women is achieved not by promoting controversial concepts, but by providing genuine assistance for women's professional development, support for mothers and families, and ensuring social protection and equal access to economic opportunities and education. Noting the important role of UN Women in supporting women's organizations on the ground, we call on it to avoid going beyond the scope of engagement agreed with states and to promote dialogue between governments and the non-governmental sector. UN bodies cannot support the confrontational activity of externally sponsored civil society organizations. The Russian Federation is committed to a constructive dialogue within the executive board. We believe that UN Women must act as an impartial body whose sole task is to improve the status of women worldwide. To this end, it is important that it distance itself from political bias, avoid double standards, and take the interests and positions of all states into account equally. Thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. I now give the floor to New Zealand. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Executive Director. New Zealand commends UN Women for its continued leadership in advancing gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in an increasingly complex global environment. We meet at a time when progress on gender equality is under significant pressure. Conflict, climate change, and economic instability are exacerbating inequalities and reinforcing barriers to women's full participation in society. In this context, UN Women's triple mandate is more important than ever. We particularly welcome UN Women's continued focus on reaching those most at risk, including in fragile and crisis-affected settings, and its emphasis on strengthening national systems, supporting women's organisations and movements, and locally led approaches. New Zealand places particular importance on UN Women's engagement in our Pacific region. Women and girls in the Pacific face disproportionate challenges, including climate-related risks, economic vulnerability, the lowest levels of women's political representation globally, and among the highest rates of gender-based violence. We welcome UN Women's continued work to support women's leadership, resilience, and economic participation in Pacific Island countries. Turning to the broader context, New Zealand strongly supports the Secretary-General's UN 80 initiative. The UN development system must be more focused, more efficient, and better coordinated, particularly at the country level, including through the retention of strong in-country technical capability. As we consider the reform agenda ahead, New Zealand recognises that a range of options are being advanced to strengthen the effectiveness and coherence of the system. It is important that these are assessed holistically, and we underline the important role of this board in providing strategic guidance and driving timely, informed decisions. Given the urgency of the challenges we face, we should move beyond analysis and towards clear conclusions and direction so that reforms can be implemented without delay. Mr. President, Executive Director, New Zealand remains concerned about the challenging funding environment facing UN Women. Core, predictable and flexible funding is essential to enable UN Women to effectively advance gender equality and women's rights, maintain its normative leadership, strengthen systems and institutions, and respond to emerging needs. We encourage all partners to support UN Women through flexible contributions and to ensure resources are directed towards areas where they can deliver lasting impacts for all women and girls. In closing, New Zealand reaffirms its strong support for UN Women and its vital role in advancing gender equality globally. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of New Zealand for his remarks. I now give the floor to Switzerland.
Monsieur le Président, Madame la Directrice.
President, Madam Executive Director, Switzerland commends UN Women for its accomplishment in the context of the Strategic Plan 2022-2025. Despite an exceptionally difficult context, UN Women has delivered excellent results in implementing its triple mandate. Switzerland welcomes the fact that UN Women remains a reliable and agile partner, including in crisis situations. Allow me to share 3 observations. First, UN Women reaffirms its central role in strengthening women's voices, leadership, and agency by achieving 115% of its targets in this area for the period. We particularly commend UN Women's efforts to strengthen localization through the provision of high quality and flexible funding to local women's organization and feminist movements. Second, significant global challenges in gender equality remain. Progress is still too slow. At the current pace, SDG 5 will not be achieved by 2030. This finding comes at a time when voluntary contributions to UN Women and global funding for gender equality are declining. In this context, UN Women plays an essential role in accelerating progress. Switzerland remains committed to supporting UN Women through predictable, flexible, and multi-year financing, and calls on all member states to do the same. Third, we recognize the significant progress made by UN Women in the context of the United Nations Development System reform initiated in 2018. We call on UN Women to actively contribute to the implementation of the UN 80 initiative and accelerate the necessary reforms. Switzerland invites UN Women to continue strengthening system-wide coherence through shared services, joint programs, and pooled funding mechanisms, particularly with UNFPA. Reform efforts must translate into tangible efficiency gains at the country level, and we encourage UN Women to establish indicators to measure this progress. Finally, Switzerland reaffirms its strong support for UN Women's triple mandate: normative leadership on the rights of all women and girls, coordination and accountability of the collective action of the United Nations system in favor of gender equality, and the operational implementation of women's empowerment. Supporting and protecting this mandate has never been more important than it is today. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Switzerland for his statement, and I'll give the floor to Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. Colombia is grateful to Madam Executive Director and to her team for the report. We recognise the sustained leadership of all of you at UN Women, and we recognise your work in promoting gender equality, the empowerment of women and girls, and in preventing and responding to all forms of gender-based violence. We especially appreciate the results achieved by the United Nations Trust Fund to end violence against women. These results show that prevention is most effective when women's leadership is supported, social norms can be transformed, and community capacity is strengthened. Colombia also welcomes the fact that 74,300 women and girls have accessed specialized services supported by the fund's partners. This is the highest figure in the strategic plan for the period through 2025. These developments show the value of integrated, sustained, and survivor-centered approaches, and also the importance of strengthening referral pathways, institutional capacity, and quality standards. We also recognize UN Women's management efforts to consolidate priorities, streamline indicators, and strengthen programmatic coherence. The Executive Board also has a central responsibility. We must accompany efforts aimed at efficiency, simplification, and institutional coherence without reducing the substantive scope and programmatic orientation of UN Women. Efficiency cannot be understood as an administrative exercise. It must serve to enhance the entity's capacity to address the priorities of women and girls, especially in those contexts of greatest exclusion, violence, and inequality. It is incumbent upon this board to ensure that management decisions preserve the UN Women's normative ambition, programmatic presence, and capacity for transformation. But this cannot be achieved without the predictability and sustainability of resources. We must strengthen the core funding of UN Women. Flexible funding is crucial to ensuring that all women, and especially women facing multiple and intersectional forms of discrimination, continue to lead conservation actions, community resilience, and sustainable development. We agree with the Executive Director that these commitments must translate into strengthened collective capacity to deliver stepped up and effective enhancement for women and girls.
Thank the distinguished representative of Colombia for his statement. I now give the floor to China. Sorry, Uganda has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, Executive Director, distinguished members of the board, fellow delegates. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the delegation of Uganda. We wish to thank the President of the board and Executive Director for their leadership and comprehensive updates shared. We commend UN Women for the significant and measurable results it has delivered across the globe, including in the African region. UN Women has been a vital partner in advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, including in the areas of political participation, economic empowerment, elimination of violence against women and girls, and the promotion of women's leadership in peace and security. These achievements have been hard-won, often under complex and resource-constrained circumstances. We recognize the urgent need to accelerate progress on SDG 5, which remains foundational to achieve the full 2030 agenda justice. We welcome the updates on the strategic plan with sharpened focus, strong regional engagement, and commitment to partnership with governments and women-led organizations. We stress the need for sustainable, predictable financing and encourage continued efforts to expand and diversify resource mobilization. We welcome the UN Women's leadership in advancing system-wide reforms through the UN 80 reform process, and we stress the need for timely, transparent, and comprehensive assessments to enable member states to engage meaningfully in the process. Reform efforts must strengthen rather than dilute the capacity of UN Women to deliver on its mandate and support member states in achieving gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. As I conclude, equality is not just a right, it is a pathway to peace, resilience, and progress. Uganda stands ready to work in partnership to realize this vision for all women and girls. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Uganda for his statement. I now give the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the United Kingdom, I thank the Executive Director for her briefing and continued leadership, alongside the UN Women's staff operating in challenging and complex circumstances. The United Kingdom remains steadfast in its commitment to gender equality and to the rights, safety and agency of all women and girls. Tackling violence against women and girls is at the heart of UK foreign policy, and we remain fully committed to UN Women's mandate. We welcome the Executive Director's final report on the Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025 and UN Women's demonstrable results at scale. Yet the picture is clear. Progress has been real, but nowhere near fast enough. No country has achieved gender equality. The world is off track to meet SDG 5 by 2030. Violence against women and girls remains an international emergency. Participation in work and public life remains unequal, and unpaid care continues to fall disproportionately on women. These are not only indicators, but measures of power, opportunity, and security. Women and girls want to live free from violence, contribute equally to their economies and societies, and shape decisions that affect their lives. The international system must stand with them, including against rollback of hard-won rights. We value UN Women's work to tackle these challenges, including our partnership on the Gender Justice Platform and the International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict, alongside our collaboration on the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. The UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women also remains an important instrument for supporting community-level responses, particularly in conflict and humanitarian settings. Together, these efforts help advance women's meaningful participation, strengthen survivor-centered accountability, and improve the international response to conflict-related sexual violence. Looking ahead, and as a long-standing partner, we look to UN Women to protect and advance gender equality norms and standards, gender mainstreaming, system coherence, and support to resident coordinators and UN development system reform. Strong accountability is essential. The strategic plan and results framework must help sharpen priorities, support learning, and monitor impact as we crucially approach 2030. Progress on risk management, financial oversight, and safeguarding must continue, with consistent implementation across country offices. Equally, strong controls must persist in the approach to protecting against sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. The UK will remain a constructive partner, ambitious for reform, clear on mandates, focused on accountability, and committed to results for women and girls. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I'll give the floor to China.
Chair, China thanks Executive Director Bahus for the briefing and commends UN Women for the efforts in advancing the implementation of the previous strategic plan. The current challenges confronting the global cause of women's empowerment further underscore the importance of UN Women. I would like to make 4 points. First, UN Women should lead through action. The Strategic Plan 2026-2029 of UN Women provides the framework and strategic blueprint for advancing gender equality over the next 4 years. Only by working together with determination and resolve, and by translating the plan's 4 strategic pathways and 3 transformative goals into concrete results, can we effectively accelerate progress towards achieving the gender equality targets of the 2030 Agenda. Second, UN Women should prioritize key areas. Gender issues are not just about matters of human rights, but also matters of development. Survival and development provide the foundation for women's empowerment. We hope that the UN Women will continue to be development-oriented, invest in more resources, and focus on areas such as poverty alleviation, education, health, employment, and social protection for women, thereby laying a solid foundation for women's comprehensive development. Third, UN Women should embrace changes. Advancing the cause of women requires us to uphold fundamental principles while fostering innovation. We support UN Women in continuing to participate in the UN 80 initiative While focusing on its triple mandates, UN Women should further optimize its organizational effectiveness, better leverage its competitive advantages, and strengthen coordination and collaboration with the UNFPA and the UNICEF and other agencies so as to better deliver results. Fourth, UN Women should better mobilize funding. Currently, the funding gap for the global cause of women's development continues to widen, seriously hindering progress towards the gender equality targets, particularly in developing countries. We call on all parties to increase their support for UN Women's core budget and development programs. We also hope that UN Women can effectively diversify its funding sources and a fundraising strategy, and also enhance the transparency, effectiveness, and efficiency of a fund utilization chair. China will fulfill its commitment to contribute $10 million to UN Women over the next 5 years, deepen bilateral exchanges and cooperation, and we're ready to work with all parties to translate the consensus reached in the Global Leaders Meeting on Women last October into concrete actions and accelerate the new progress for women's all-round development. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement, and now give the floor to Lesotho. Lesotho, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished members of the Executive Board, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The Kingdom of Lesotho is honored to address the annual session of the UN Women Executive Board under Agenda Item 2. We thank the Executive Director for the comprehensive annual report, which demonstrates UN Women's continued leadership in advancing gender equality, strengthening multilateral cooperation, and supporting member states to accelerate the implementation of Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the 23rd Agenda, and commitments under UN80. The Kingdom of Lesotho welcomes the strong results achieved in 2025, particularly in women's economic empowerment, ending gender-based violence, advancing women's leadership in peace and governance, and strengthening gender-responsive financing. We commend UN Women for its expanded support to countries in crisis and for its efforts to ensure that humanitarian responses remain gender-responsive and grounded in the lived realities of women and girls. As a committed executive board member for the 2026 to 2028 term, the Kingdom of Lesotho reaffirms its dedication to working collaboratively with all member states to ensure that UN Women is well-resourced, strategically positioned, and institutionally strengthened to deliver on its mandate. We underscore the importance of predictable, flexible, and sustainable financing, which remains essential for achieving transformative results at scale. At the national level, Lesotho continues to advance gender equality through strengthened social protection systems, expanded digital inclusion initiatives, and renewed efforts to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. We are deepening partnerships with UN Women to enhance institutional capacity, accelerate implementation of the African Gender and Development Index, and support women's leadership across all sectors of society. The Kingdom of Lesotho also emphasizes that the UN80 initiative must reinforce multilateralism and ensure that gender equality remains central to global development, peace, and security efforts. We welcome UN Women's role in shaping this agenda and call for continued support to least developed countries, where structural inequalities remain profound and where investment in women and girls yields the highest returns. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Lesotho emphasizes the Executive Director's commitment to transparency, accountability, and
I thank the distinguished delegate of Lesotho for his comments. I now give the floor to Morocco.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you, President. The Kingdom of Morocco would like to begin by expressing its gratitude to the Executive Director of UN Women for the presentation of the annual report, which reflects remarkable work accomplished under particularly demanding conditions. Morocco also wishes to extend its warm congratulations to the President of the Executive Board, as well as to the entire Bureau for their sustained efforts in the service of a mandate that has never been more crucial. President, Morocco fully aligns itself with the priorities advanced by UN Women and is a committed partner in their implementation. Equality between men and women, the empowerment of women and girls, and their full and effective participation in economic, political, and social life constitute key pillars of the kingdom's national policy under the leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. At the legislative and institutional levels, Morocco continued in 2026 to strengthen its legal framework in favor of women's rights by pursuing ongoing reforms in the areas of protection against violence, access to justice, and economic empowerment. With regard to political representation, Morocco is continuing its efforts to increase women's participation in elected bodies and positions of responsibility through quota mechanisms and proactive parity policies. The pioneering study conducted by Morocco and referenced in the executive director's report, which estimated that unpaid domestic work represents 26% of national GDP, illustrates the data-driven approach that now guides public policy development in Morocco, an approach that recognizes and gives due appreciation to women's invisible contribution to the economy. Regarding the issue of a potential merger between UN Women and UNFPA, Morocco has taken note of the strategic evaluation of April 2026, as well as the document on legal implications presented by the Office of Legal Affairs. Morocco reaffirms its commitment to full respect for the distinct and complementary mandates of the two organizations, to predictable and sustainable financing commensurate with their ambitions. Action must remain strong, targeted, and measurable for the benefit of recipient populations. Morocco renews its firm support for UN Women in its Strategic Plan 2026-2029 and commits to remaining an active, contributing, constructive partner in achieving gender empowerment, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco for his statement. I now give the floor to Spain.
España agradece.
Spain thanks the Executive Director and the entire UN Women team for presenting this annual report, and above all, we thank them for their leadership at a particularly complex time for the multilateral system and for the global gender equality agenda at a time when women's rights are once again being questioned and renegotiated. And in this context, UN Women represents one of the main institutional guarantees in terms of safeguarding the progress made and further promoting transformation still pending. Spain has a firm commitment to feminist cooperation and foreign policy. This is grounded in the universality and indivisibility of human rights and the conviction that gender equality is not just a fundamental right, but a necessary condition for achieving sustainable development, lasting peace, and more robust and inclusive democracies. This is why Spain considers UN Women to be a key strategic partner, and we are particularly gratified to have recently signed a new strategic partnership framework for the period 2026 through 2029. In it, we reaffirm our shared priorities and our willingness to further strengthen this historic partnership. This new framework reflects our common commitment to three priority areas. Firstly, the economic empowerment of women through the promotion of care policies, financing and budgets with a gender perspective. Secondly, the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls. This includes technology-facilitated violence. And thirdly, promoting women's leadership and the effective participation of women at all levels of decision-making, including advancing the women, peace and security agenda and supporting feminist and women's organizations as essential agents of change. Spain also wishes to highlight the importance of the recent conference on feminist foreign policy held in Madrid. This brought together governments, international organizations, civil society and feminist leaders from all different regions of the world. The conference highlighted that feminist approaches are not just a matter of principle, but also of effectiveness. This commitment is reflected also in our financial support to the organization. Just 3 years, Spain has more than increased its contribution to UN Women's core resources by 6-fold. We reiterate the importance of predictable, flexible and quality funding to enable UN Women to effectively fulfill its normative, coordination and operational mandates. For this reason, Spain has increased the level of multi-year commitments to the agency in order to increase the predictability of the lines of work. Spain thus reaffirms its full support for UN Women and we look forward to continuing to work together to advance the rights, leadership and empowerment of all women and girls. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Spain for his comments and now give the floor to UAE.
Madam Executive Director, colleagues, I thank you for your statements and Executive Director Bahous for presenting the final report on the implementation of the UN Women Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025. The report underscores that the progress toward gender equality remains fragile and cannot be assumed. Despite persistent challenges, it shows that targeted investments, effective partnerships, and sustained political commitment can yield meaningful results even in a complex global environment. The implementation of the strategic plan offers clear guidance for the future. First, amid fiscal constraints and competing priorities, we must expand blended financing mechanism, mobilize private capital through targeted incentives, and deepen collaboration with international financial institutions to scale proven high-impact programs that deliver measurable outcomes for women and girls. Second, closing gaps for women and girls in conflict and crisis settings require operationalizing the humanitarian development peace nexus through joint programming, ensuring dedicated funding for women-led organizations, and systematically integrating women's leadership and participation in peace processes, recovery planning, and reconstruction efforts. Third, as emerging technologies evolve, we must establish clear policy framework to prevent and respond to technology-facilitated violence, invest in digital literacy and STEM education for women and girls, and expand equitable access to digital infrastructure so they can safely and fully benefit from innovation. Looking ahead to Strategic Plan 2026 to 2029, the UAE encourages a continued focus on impact and efficiency. The next strategic plan should leverage UN Women's comparative advantages, strengthen its coordination role across the UN system, and prioritize scalable solutions to accelerate progress toward the 2030 agenda. The UAE remains a committed partner to the UN Women and looks forward to constructive engagements with board members throughout this session, and I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of United Arab Emirates and now give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, President. Gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls remain urgent global priorities. Australia is firmly committed to this agenda, recognising the clear and well-established benefits. Advancing gender equality reduces poverty and conflict, strengthens social cohesion and well-being, unlocks economic growth, and enhances prosperity for current and future generations. In this context, we continue to see the enduring importance of UN Women's triple mandate, its normative role, its coordination across the UN system, and its programming work on the ground. Together, these functions are essential to driving systemic change and delivering tangible outcomes for women and girls everywhere. Australia continues to support efforts to advance meaningful reform through the UN 80 initiative. We support bold change that preserves what matters most and ensures the system is equipped for future challenges. At the same time, the proposed merger of UN Women and UNFPA must be assessed on its merits, based on clear evidence of its capacity to strengthen delivery and impact while fully preserving agreed mandates. We again seek assurance that those mandates will be safeguarded through any reform process and underscore the important role of the executive boards in reviewing merger proposals. While we are prepared to consider the merits of a merger, alternate reform options should also be fully examined. We welcome the joint work underway to develop options for Member States' consideration and encourage these to be shared at the earliest opportunity. As a long-standing partner of UN Women, we remain committed to reforms that protect its critical functions and mandates, preserve service delivery, and strengthen the UN system's capacity for delivering for women and girls. UN Women's work to build resilience to disasters, reduce discrimination, and support survivors of violence, including in our region, the Indo-Pacific, has made a meaningful difference, and we would like to see it continue. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia for her statement. And I'll give the floor to Norway. My updated list of speakers has Libya, Brazil, Cuba, and Mexico. Norway, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot, President, and their colleagues. Norway wishes to thank UN Women for its tireless efforts to promote and to protect women's rights and gender equality. And Madam Executive Director Sima, thanks a lot for your briefing and for the annual report presented to us today, and to your entire leadership here and to all staff working 24/7 across the globe to protect women's rights. Allow me to highlight 3 quick points. First, women's rights and gender equality remains a top priority in Norway's foreign and development policy, both politically and of course financially. This is why we are maintaining a high level of core support to the UN Women. Second, we welcome the very robust results documented in the annual report. We would, however, encourage a stronger analysis on how outputs contribute to systemic change, including impacts on target groups. And given the continued funding pressures, we are worried about how financial constraints potentially also can affect the UN Women's performance and the UN system-wide efforts towards gender equality. Could you share insights into the consequences of persistent gaps in capacity and financing for gender equality across the UN system? And what can be done to improve this situation? We'd welcome reflections on that. We welcome how the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women strengthen local women's organizations, as you emphasized in your briefing, Sima. Could you also then share more information about UN Women's work towards supporting local women's organizations? And are different mechanisms, including the UN Trust Fund and the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund, complementary at country level? Third and finally, when rights and democracy are weakened, the risk of conflict and crisis increases. And we know it is the poorest and the most vulnerable amongst us who suffer the most when the ideological tide is turning and funding is cut. Strengthening the UN as a key arena for developing and defending norms on gender equality is therefore a top priority for Norway. We want a UN that is fit for purpose and that delivers measurable impact for people on the ground. This is why Norway firmly supports the Secretary General's UN reform initiative generally. When it comes to the suggested merger, we will come back to that in the afternoon, but just stress here, we need safeguards and we need to protect and preserve the distinct mandate of UN Women. Thanks a lot.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway for his statement. I'll now give the floor to Libya. Libya, you have the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Executive Board, the State of Libya wishes to express its appreciation for the efforts undertaken by UN Women in the implementation of its mandate, and to thank the Executive Secretariat for the comprehensive reports presented during this session, particularly those related to the implementation of the strategic plan, as well as the functions of evaluation, internal audit, and ethics. Libya reaffirms its continued support for the work of the entity in advancing the rights and empowerment of women in a manner consistent with the priorities of member states and their national specificities. Libya has carefully reviewed the report submitted on oversight functions and underscores the importance of strengthening transparency and accountability within the system, ensuring the independence of these essential functions and providing them with the necessary resources. Libya also commends the progress achieved in improving the quality of evaluations and stresses the need to draw upon their findings to guide policies and programs, thereby enhancing efficiency and effectiveness at the national level. With regard to efforts to support women and girls, Libya reaffirms its firm commitment to ensuring their full rights and enhancing their participation across all sectors, in line with national priorities and the country's broader trajectory towards women's empowerment. In this context, Libya highlights the important role played by the Ministry of Women's Affairs in formulating policies and programs aimed at advancing the status of women and girls, strengthening their participation in public life, and ensuring equal access to services and opportunities. Libya emphasizes that investing in the capacities of women and girls constitutes a fundamental pillar for achieving sustainable development and promoting societal stability. Libya welcomes the progress made in the implementation of the United Nations Development System reform and underscores the importance of enhancing interagency coordination, improving operational efficiency, and developing joint working mechanisms that contribute to achieving tangible results at the national level. Libya stresses that these reforms must be grounded in respect for national priorities and development needs, while taking into account the cultural and social specificities of member states. Regarding the ongoing discussions on structural reform initiatives, Libya underscores the importance of ensuring that such discussions are inclusive and transparent, and that they are based on complete information and thorough analysis, including assessments of potential impacts on country programs, existing mandates, and technical capacities. Libya stresses the need to preserve the mandates of entities as established by UN bodies and to ensure the programs responding to national priorities remain unaffected. Libya reaffirms its commitment to constructive cooperation with the Executive Board and UN Women, and to working collectively to advance the rights and empowerment of women in full respect for the cultural and social values of member states in a manner that contributes to sustainable development for all. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Libya for his statement. I now give the floor to Brazil.
Mr. President, Madam Executive Director, distinguished board members and observers, Brazil values its close partnership with UN Women and remains firmly committed to strengthening our cooperation. Regarding the annual report for 2025, Brazil considers it a comprehensive and balanced assessment of the entity's work. The report demonstrates that UN Women successfully concluded an implementation cycle of its strategic plan, achieving positive overall performance and delivering significant progress across its 3 pillars of work. Brazil welcomes the report reference to the country as an example of positive results in the areas of human rights and non-discrimination. We are committed to institutionalizing intersectional approaches in gender equality policies, making them more responsive to the specific needs of African descendant and indigenous women. We remain committed to strengthening public policies that promote equality, inclusion, and social justice. Although the annual report does not explicitly refer to South-South and triangular cooperation, several of the initiatives highlighted, such as the Tlatelolco commitment, refer to valuable collaboration among developing countries. I take this opportunity to highlight some important initiatives undertaken in 2025 within the framework of Brazil's cooperation with UN Women. Under the program Pathways to Equality, the regional dimension was expanded with a focus on generating and disseminating knowledge to advance the economic empowerment of rural women in Latin America and the Caribbean. At the institutional level, important progress was made in mainstreaming gender into Brazil's international development cooperation. Another important development was the establishment of a partnership among the Brazilian Agency for Cooperation, UN Women, and Brazil's Ministry of Development and Social Assistance to promote regional dialogue on care policies. We reaffirm the strategic importance of our partnership with UN Women in promoting gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, fostering the exchange of best practices and strengthening capacities among countries. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Brazil for her comments. I now give the floor to Cuba. Cuba, you have the floor.
Señor Presidente,
President, esteemed Sima Bahous, we recognize the indispensable work of UN Women, and we support the calls to guarantee sufficient, flexible, and predictable funding to enable the entity to
to fully complete its mandate in the furtherance of gender equality and women's empowerment. For Cuba, the advancement of women is not a future aspiration or an abstract concept. It is a reality that we have built up over decades with political will and social justice, and the results are tangible. Cuban women actively participate in all areas of our national life. Women represent a considerable majority among professionals in the areas of health, education, science, and the legal sector. Women represent more than half of parliamentary constituencies, and they enjoy firm legal footing through the Constitution, the Family Code, and the comprehensive strategy for preventing and tackling gender violence, including domestic violence. Cuba was the first country to sign and the second country to ratify CEDAW. With this record in defense of the advancement of women, Cuba has decided to present the candidacy of Dr. Yamila Gonzalez Ferrer for re-election as an expert on CEDAW, and we would be grateful for the support of member states on the coming 26th of June. President, women and girls in Cuba are suffering today as they have never suffered before. They are suffering the devastating impacts of the United States economic, commercial, and financial blockade, the oil stranglehold, and secondary sanctions against those who have decided to trade with Cuba. More than 32,000 pregnant mothers or women today face greater risk due to the lack of medical supplies and also due to prolonged blackouts that prevent follow-up diagnostics. Cuban women today face a lack of transportation, a lack of electricity, gas, and water services due to fuel shortages. Cuban mothers live with the anguish of continuous power cuts. These are a hindrance to daily life and to the normal functioning of hospitals, neonatal wards, and intensive care units, and also surgical units where their children receive care. These are not mere statistics. The blockade exists. It causes harm, and on many occasions it kills. It amounts to the collective punishment of an entire people, and its effects fall disproportionately upon women and girls. Despite these enormous challenges, Cuba will rise up again as it has done so many times. We will not give up on our commitment to gender equality, social justice, and the empowerment of women. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba for her statement, and now give the floor to Mexico.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Distinguished Executive Director, colleagues, members, observers. Allow me to begin by pointing out that Mexico recognizes UN Women as the central actor in the multilateral system for converting global commitments in the area of gender equality into concrete public policies, such as, for instance, those derived from the Commission on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, the Beijing platform, and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. The report we are reviewing today is particularly important. It concludes the cycle for the UN Women's Strategic Plan 2022 to 2025. It highlights important progress in a global context that is adverse, that includes multiple crises, setbacks, and growing opposition to gender equality. And we note with great concern that there's still a global structural lag. No country has achieved gender equality. Women only have 64% of the rights that men enjoy. And under the current trajectory, SDG 5 will not be achieved by 2030, and this was an indispensable condition for sustainable development. The gaps that we find to be particularly critical are found in the areas of labor participation, unpaid care work, political representation, and gender-based violence. And we recognize that despite this challenging context, UN Women has been able to achieve results on a global scale, including strengthening legal frameworks, adopting equality laws and policies, and enabling access to services and resources for more than 14 million women. Against this backdrop, Mexico emphasizes the need to speed up action, to strengthen financing, and to avoid regulatory regression. As regards our national level, Mexico has its priorities aligned with the actions reported in the report, especially promoting comprehensive care systems We have a national progressive care system, which we continue to strengthen, and we think that this is the best vehicle to achieve substantive equality and for the full enjoyment of women's rights. Secondly, combating all forms of violence against women and girls, including digital violence, and promoting women's participation in decision-making. We hope that we will be laying the groundwork for strengthening UN Women, both in terms of its mandate and in terms of its actions on the ground. We hope that member states will unite around the priority of equipping UN Women with the resources that it needs in order to continue bringing services to millions of women and girls, and in contributing to the construction of a world where substantive equality is a reality for all people. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Mexico for her comments. We have had the last speaker on my list. I'll now invite the Secretariat for a few more remarks. May I now invite the Deputy Executive Director, Madam, Deputy Executive Director, Chrissy Maddy, for the remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And I really would like to start by just thanking all the delegations for your, first of all, insightful comments, but most importantly, for your strong support for UN Women. It's been really heartwarming to listen to you this morning, how you have emphasized our mandate, the criticality of our triple mandate, how you have emphasized the challenging context that is there and the importance of the political commitment, how you have also noted the improvements that UN Women has made as an organization on how we are working, on our effectiveness, on our efficiency, and how you have highlighted the results that we have been able to achieve. At the same time, your strong call for predictable and flexible funding, core funding for the organization, has been really critical. So I really want to thank you on behalf of all of us for that very strong expression of support for our work until now and moving forward. There were a couple of specific questions, and I would like to, I know we are running out of time soon, but I will try to respond concisely to some of the specific questions that have been raised, and my colleague Narazai will then complement, and if you need further details afterwards, will be of course available. In the group statement that was presented by Luxembourg, there were questions, for example, on sustainability, how we are actually ensuring the sustainability moving from one strategic plan to the next one. And just very concretely tell you, 80% of the indicators of the strategic plan were adopted from the previous strategic plan. This helps us to really build on a multi-accumulative results across moving from one strategic plan cycle to another. Also, we've embedded sustainability at the core of the strategic plan, both through our programming strategies that are all aimed at building national and local ownership, but also through our revamped partnerships approach, which focus on working with and through others and building capacity of our partners. In terms of enhanced focus, we have simplified the results framework, going from the 7 strategic plan outcome in the previous cycle to 3, and also introduced fewer indicators so that we can measure our aggregate impact more clearly. Improving how we are actually telling our results story. I hope you all have visited our transparency portal, and if you haven't, please do so immediately after this session. We are in the process. We are very proud of the transparency portal, and actually we are improving it further. Currently, we are publishing results and financial data against a strategic plan and strategic notes of the country offices and regional offices. But we will also in the future, later this year, publish results and financial data against projects, against the strategic note direct funding modality, There was also a question on what were the lessons learned from the previous cycle that informed the current strategic plan. The key lessons learned from our work is that most effective and sustainable results come from adaptive, evidence-based programming, which is locally owned, institutionally embedded, inclusive, and supported by strong monitoring and diversified funding. These lessons from the implementation of the 2022-2025 strategic plan were really central to the design of the current strategic plan. In terms of, there was also a request or sort of comment on the importance of monitoring the impact of our work. We have introduced a quarterly business review a few years ago, which is a very, very powerful internal tool, which we have used so far to track the organizational efficiency and effectiveness results. Now we are under the leadership of Narazai, we are introducing a standardized periodic strategic level monitoring for multi-year whole strategic plan and strategic note results. And just the last word on our strategic note process, so which also important, I think, all of us to recognize that strengthening capacity of partners and of the UN system as a whole takes time. I think we see this as a gradual process. It takes time before we can really measure results at the impact level. So let me just stop there in the interest of time, but I really want to thank you for your very insightful questions.
And I'll give the floor to the ED, the director of the floor. Sorry. I give the floor to the Deputy Executive Director, Madam.
Is also provided by Deputy Executive Director.
Thank you.